Did you know that the most powerful black dynasty in Texas isn't a politician or an oil tycoon, but a private equity firm in Austin that manages $100 billion, and most people have never heard of it? But that's just one of the 8 richest black empires from Texas we'll be looking at today, with each one having a story crazier than the last. So by the time you get to number 1, you'll be completely blown away. Let's dive in. Number 8, the Jakes Dynasty. The Dallas bishop who turned faith into a venture capital operation. Most people hear megachurch pastor and think collection plates and book deals. Bishop T.D. Jakes looked at that template, kept what worked, and quietly added a film production company, a real estate portfolio, a private jet schedule that spans Hollywood and Dallas, and something called the Good Soil Forum, a capital investment vehicle that has deployed over $500,000 directly into small black-owned businesses in the DFW area. That last one is the detail that most people miss entirely, and it's the one that signals exactly what kind of dynasty the Jakes family is actually building. The Potter's House in Dallas anchors everything, a 30,000-member megachurch that functions as the spiritual and economic engine of one of the most influential faith brands in the world. Bishop Jakes' personal net worth sits between $20 million and $50 million, though his total business empire through TDJ Enterprises, including film production credits like Miracles from Heaven, could push that number considerably higher by some estimates. He and his family reside in a Fort Worth estate that doubles as the global operations hub for everything they manage, flying private to navigate a schedule that moves between the pulpit and the production lot. Here's the part that makes this genuinely interesting as a wealth story. The intergenerational transfer is already happening and it's working. His daughter, Sarah Jakes Roberts, has built an independent personal brand estimated at $18 million, commanding speaking fees between $20,000 and $50,000 per event. His daughter, Cora Jakes Coleman, runs her own media and real estate operations. The Jakes family isn't just rich. They're building a wealth transfer architecture that most dynasties spend generations trying to figure out, and most never do. In Dallas, a city that takes its megachurches and its money equally seriously, the Jakes family sits at the intersection of both. And they wear that crown, as they'd probably tell you themselves, with faith-backed results. Faith, film, and venture philanthropy. Not a combination you see every day. But the next man on this list built his dynasty the old-fashioned way, by going on television and selling 100 million grills. Number 7, the Michael Strahan Dynasty. The divorce that cost $15 million. Here is the most instructive financial detail about Michael Strahan's career, and it's not one he'd necessarily lead with in a profile. In 2006, a judge ordered him to pay his ex-wife $15.3 million in a divorce settlement. At the time, more than half of his entire net worth. Most people don't financially survive that kind of hit. Strahan turned it into the opening chapter of a second career that has since rebuilt his fortune several times over, and in doing so, made the $15 million look like a rounding error. Born in Houston and shaped at Texas Southern University before 15 years with the New York Giants, Strahan's estimated 2026 net worth sits at $65 million. His media salary alone, anchoring Good Morning America, Fox NFL Sunday, and the $100,000 Pyramid, generates between $17 million and $21.5 million annually. That's not athlete money, that's broadcaster royalty. His NFL career had already produced $76.3 million in earnings before he pivoted. But the pivot is where the real story is. Smack Entertainment, his production and talent management company, is the vehicle most likely to push Strahan's wealth into genuinely dynastic territory. And his menswear and athleisure lines, with retail footprints across JCPenney and Men's Warehouse, have a surprisingly substantial presence across the Texas market specifically, where his name still carries the weight of a hometown hero. He's publicly expressed interest in joining an NFL ownership group, which would require partners given current franchise valuations, but would represent the kind of wealth inflection point that permanently redefines your category. Keep watching this one. Strahan rebuilt his fortune from a $15 million hole. That's impressive. But the next dynasty on this list turned an actual countertop grill into $250 million in personal royalties. Let's see how. Number 6. The George Foreman dynasty. Sold 100 million grills and left a $300 million estate. Let's start this one with the fact that refuses to be upstaged by any financial figure. George Foreman named all 5 of his sons George Edward Foreman. You heard it right, all 5. When asked why, he said, and this is a direct quote worth pausing on, that if you've been hit as many times as he was hit by Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, and Ernie Shavers, you're not going to remember many names, so you might as well keep it simple. That is either the funniest or the most practical dynasty building strategy in this entire video, depending on your perspective. Now let's talk about the money, because that's why we're all here. So, when George Foreman retired from boxing the first time, he had roughly $5 million left. By the mid-1990s, he was nearing broke. Then came the George Foreman Grill, a countertop contact grill that sold over 100 million units globally and generated peak monthly royalty income of $8 million. Not annually, monthly. In 1999, Sultan Inc. bought out his naming rights for $137.5 million in cash and stock. Over the course of the grill era, his personal royalties totaled between $200 million and $250 million. He passed away in March 2025, leaving behind a $300 million estate, a 1,000-acre ranch in Houston, several active ministries, and a family that has been explicitly structured around the George Foreman name as a perpetual brand asset. The licensing deals continue. The identity architecture he built, one name, maximum unity, zero confusion, keeps generating passive income for his widow, Mary Joan Martelli, and his 12 children. From nearly broke to $300 million through a kitchen appliance. Houston roots, family faith, and the most memorable naming convention in billionaire history. The George dynasty is built to last. Now, the next name on our list built his entire $300 million fortune without borrowing a single dollar. Not because he didn't need to, but because his religion said no. Number 5. The Hakeem Olajuwon dynasty. $300 million in Houston real estate, bought with zero debt. Most real estate empires are built on leverage. Borrow cheap, buy big, let the tenants pay down the debt. It is the standard playbook, and it works until interest rates move against you, credit dries up, or the market shifts faster than your refinancing timeline. Hakeem, the dream. Olajuwon built a $300 million real estate portfolio in Houston without touching any of that. Not because he didn't have access to financing, because his Islamic faith prohibits the payment or receiving of interest, and he took that seriously enough to build an entirely debt-free wealth model around it. Think about what that actually means in practice. Every single one of those properties was purchased in cash, at market value, without any amplification from leverage. His returns are lower than they would be with debt, and his risk is essentially zero. In an environment where rising interest rates have stressed leveraged real estate portfolios across the country, Olajuwon's holdings are effectively recession-proof. That is not an accident of timing. It is a deliberate philosophical choice that turned out to be one of the most sophisticated risk management strategies in Texas real estate. His approach was always rooted in what he calls home court advantage, investing only in Houston, only in areas he knew intimately, only in land with a story he could read. He purchased parcels near Houston's light rail development and Minute Maid Park before the surrounding areas were fully built out, identifying value through local knowledge that institutional investors didn't have. One deal involved buying land for $2 million that he later sold for $15 million. The converted swampland trade that most investors would have passed on entirely. In 2026, he's extending his footprint into Guyana with property in the Taj Diamond community, which tells you his eye for pre-development value has not diminished in retirement. The dream doesn't just still have it on the court in memories, he still has it at the closing table. But the next dynasty didn't build their fortune on land. They built it on the one asset that every single major company in Texas depends on to function: people. Number 4. The Janice Bryant Howroyd dynasty. From a $900 loan to a billion-dollar business. In 1978, Janice Bryant Howroyd borrowed $900 from her mother, opened a staffing agency out of a small office in Beverly Hills, and started placing workers. That is the entire origin story. No venture capital, no MBA from a prestigious institution, no industry connections. $900 and an understanding of something most people overlook. That every single company in the world needs people, will always need people, and will pay well for someone who can consistently find the right ones. Fast forward to 2026, and Act One Group operates in 33 countries, serves over 17,000 clients, generates approximately $1.1 billion in annual revenue, and employs 2,600 people internally while placing hundreds of thousands more. Howroyd's personal net worth sits between $620 million and $675 million. She is the first Black woman in American history to build and own a billion-dollar business. Not the first in her industry, not the first in her region. The first, categorically, in the country. In Texas specifically, Act One Group functions as the largest Black-owned employer in Houston, providing the human infrastructure for the city's energy, healthcare, and logistics sectors. Three of the most economically significant industries in the state. That's not just a business presence. That is structural embeddedness. When you control the hiring pipelines for a city's dominant industries, you are not a vendor. You are part of the architecture. She is known for a down-home leadership style that reads as warmly personal but is tactically precise, a combination that she credits with allowing her to build trust across multiple economic cycles, from the dot-com bubble to COVID-19, without ever compromising on the integrity that keeps long-term clients loyal. The philosophy, continuity over brilliance, build systems that outlast markets. $900 apparently was enough to start. The first Black woman to own a billion-dollar business, built on people. The next dynasty built theirs on something literally underground, and they had to go to 3 different continents to do it. Number 3. The Lawal dynasty, the Nigerian immigrant who built the #1 Black-owned business in America. Here is a sentence that doesn't get written often enough in conversations about American business. A Nigerian immigrant who arrived in Houston to study at Texas Southern University became, by 2005, the head of the #1 Black-owned business in the entire United States. Kase Lukman Lawal built Kamak Holdings from a small agricultural commodities trading firm in 1986, sugar, tobacco, rice, into a multi-billion-dollar oil and gas conglomerate that eventually surpassed $1.4 billion in peak annual revenues and earned him diplomatic-level relationships with heads of state across Africa. The pivot from agricultural commodities to oil was the defining decision. In the early 1990s, Lawal secured rights to land blocks in Africa and partnered with Conoco, one of Houston's own energy giants, to enter the exploration and production sector. That partnership gave Kamak access to the technical expertise and financial credibility necessary to compete in a capital-intensive industry that had historically been closed to Black entrepreneurs entirely. He didn't just find a gap, he forced one open. His net worth is estimated between $2.5 billion and $3 billion, anchored by private holdings and 6 oil blocks in Kenya that represent the family's ongoing international footprint. The public arm, Aaron Energy, went through financial restructuring. But here's the insight that the Lawal story teaches better than almost any other on this list. In industrial dynasties, the separation of public corporate liabilities from private family assets is not negligence. It is architecture. The private wealth remains intact regardless of what the publicly traded vehicle does. He served on the Port of Houston Authority. He funded educational institutions across the city. He hosted foreign dignitaries and presidents. Houston's home court advantage, the world's energy capital, with the financing networks and technical talent to match, was the platform he needed to compete globally. And he used every inch of it. From Lagos to Houston to the boardrooms of African heads of state. Now the next dynasty didn't cross an ocean, but she crossed a threshold that no Black woman had ever crossed before, and she did it from the Third Ward. Number 2, the Knowles-Carter dynasty. $3.5 billion fortune with a crazy story behind it. In late 2025, Beyoncé Knowles-Carter officially crossed the billionaire threshold. That sentence sounds simple. What it actually represents is the first time a black female musician has ever joined the billionaire class through the specific combination of music ownership, touring economics, brand equity, and business diversification that the Knowles-Carter model has spent 2 decades building. It did not happen by accident, and it did not happen because of fame alone. It happened because of Parkwood Entertainment. Founded in 2010, Parkwood is the ownership architecture behind everything: music production, film, brand partnerships, distribution, capturing the majority of gross revenue from every venture rather than the minority that traditional label deals produce. The Renaissance World Tour generated between $579 million and $600 million. The Cowboy Carter Tour followed with over $400 million from just 32 dates, plus an estimated $50 million in merchandise. Her 2025 personal earnings hit approximately $148 million before taxes. Her music catalog, entirely owned through Parkwood, is valued at $300 million. Sir Davis Whiskey, launched in partnership with Moet Hennessy as a tribute to her moonshiner grandfather, is her entry into the global luxury spirits market. Sacred Hair Care is her beauty sector play. Combined with Jay-Z's estimated $2.5 billion to $2.8 billion, the Knowles-Carter household is a $3.5 billion dynasty with its roots in the 3rd Ward of Houston. Their real estate portfolio alone is valued at $313 million, including an $88 million Bel Air estate and the $200 million Malibu mansion, the most expensive home ever sold in the state of California. The Houston thread is not decorative. During Hurricane Harvey, the family deployed private millions in aid while government response was still being organized. The philosophy that runs through their entire financial architecture: buy the block you grew up on, build ownership into every deal, circulate wealth back through the community that produced you, is specifically and deliberately a 3rd Ward philosophy. A girl from Houston became a billionaire. She did it on her own terms, and she did it on purpose. 3rd Ward to $1 billion. That's the story summed up. But the man at number 1? He manages more money in a single quarter than most countries produce in a year. And most people in Texas have never heard his name. Number 1. The Robert F. Smith Dynasty. The unbelievable $100 billion under management. Ask 1,000 people in Texas to name the wealthiest black family in the state. Most of them will say Beyoncé. Almost none of them will say Robert F. Smith. And that gap between his actual power and his public profile might be the single most instructive thing about how serious wealth at the highest level actually operates. Smith is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Vista Equity Partners, an Austin-headquartered private equity firm that manages approximately $100 billion in assets. Not $10 billion, not $20 billion, $100 billion, deployed exclusively into enterprise software companies, the mission-critical infrastructure that other businesses cannot function without. His individual net worth is estimated between $10 billion and $10.8 billion, making him the wealthiest black individual in Texas and one of the wealthiest in the world. And unlike fortunes tied to public market performance or commodity prices, the Vista model is built on something more durable: operational control of software companies that generate recurring revenue regardless of what the broader economy does. The Vista Playbook, a set of over 50 standardized operating procedures applied to every acquired company, is the mechanism that makes this work at scale. It means Vista's returns are not dependent on genius or luck, but on a repeatable system applied consistently across 80-plus portfolio companies employing over 65,000 people globally. The annualized return since inception? Approximately 31%, for 2 decades. That number, sustained over that time horizon, is not a performance. It is a monument. Now, the complexity. In 2020, Smith settled with the Department of Justice and the IRS for $139 million, resolving a tax evasion investigation involving offshore accounts. It was the kind of event that ends careers and reputations. Smith's response was to lean into something that had already been defining his public identity: radical philanthropy. He had already become the first African American to sign the Giving Pledge, committing the majority of his wealth to charitable causes. And in 2019, He stood before the graduating class of Morehouse College and told them he would personally eliminate every single dollar of their student loan debt. The total cost, $34 million. He paid it. That moment didn't just generate headlines, it ignited a national conversation about the racial wealth gap, educational debt, and what it looks like when someone uses their fortune as a genuine instrument of systemic change rather than a personal monument. The DOJ settlement and the Morehouse Pledge exist in the same biography. The private equity architect and the transformative philanthropist are the same person. That complexity and the friction between how the wealth was built and how it is being deployed is what makes the Smith dynasty the most layered, most powerful, and most genuinely interesting Black family in Texas, by a considerable margin. And there you have it, 8 richest Black families from Texas that practically run the state economy. Which of these empires fascinated you the most? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, and for more such interesting peeks into how Black wealth is prospering across the globe, take a look at Global Status.